We'll start with a short reading from 1 Peter chapter 3. Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring you to God. He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. He has gone on to heaven and is at the right hand of God, with angels, authorities, and powers made subject to him. Let us pray. Lord, you have looked upon us with favor and have shown us your glory in the resurrection of your Son. We declare the greatness of your merciful love as we cry out, "Glory to you, Lord of life, for the fashioning of the marvels of creation, for endowing us with the wonders of human life, for freeing us from bondage to sin, for redeeming us by your precious blood, for giving us hope through your death and resurrection, for making us children and heirs of your Father, for giving us life in the power of the Spirit, for enlightening us with your truth, for blessing this community with your gifts, for strengthening us this day in your service, for promising us eternal life in your presence. Glory to you, Lord of life. Blessed be you, our Lord and Father. You have walked with us this day, sharing your word and your living bread. Stay with us now as evening falls, that the joy of your presence may burn in our hearts, for you are our light forever and ever. In the name of Jesus, amen. It's good to find Bibles. So, Judges 9, Abimelech, the son of the king. So here's what Gideon does, if you were here for the Gideon hoo-ha the last 2 weeks. At the end of the saga of Gideon, Gideon is offered the kingship. Gideon denies the title but takes the job. Gideon's legacy is this: let's have all the privilege of being a monarch without any of the responsibility. That's what he does. And so remember that the Gideon cycle starts in idolatry and ends in idolatry, all with Gideon. And Gideon becomes the idolatrous one again. So he does have 70 sons, which means he has a harem, which means he acts like a king. And he does have royal clothing, which he makes an idol, which means he acts like a king. And he does ask for tribute, which means he acts like a king. And so he has 70 sons. And one of those is the name of Abimelech, and which means literally the son of the king. I'm not the king, but you got the Gideon story. So Abimelech, there's some anomalies in the Abimelech story. Remember that after Deborah, the overarching and the overall ethic of the people of God and the judges is in serious decline, to where when you get to Samson, it's awful. There's nothing, So the people and even Samson himself. So there are some anomalies that are different in the cycle of Abimelech. There is no external oppression. God doesn't raise up an oppressor, because this is really a continuation of the Gideon story. But there is a move away from autonomy. So I've asked this question a bunch of times. Does autonomy work? Because Israel is this loose coalition of 12 tribes, and they don't seem to get along well, and they don't play nice together. And so one of my premises is autonomy is really tough for it. It doesn't work well. And what Abimelech, he recognizes that. I'm going to give Abimelech a little, at least, leadership credit. I don't give him any other credit, but a little leadership credit to begin with, that there needs to be a move from autonomy. So he poses a question to the people about that, and he basically asks, hey, what would be better? Consensus, judgeship from 70 sons, or just one who happens to wear a really good name? The son of the king, hint, hint. So, so he does this at a place called Shechem. Shechem is an interesting place in the history of Israel. Shechem is one of the cities in Israel that you can go to for mercy. So it's if you commit manslaughter and the avenger comes after you. So these are cities of refuge. So it's supposed to be a safe place, at least according to Levitical law. But there's some history prior, to all that. It's at Shechem. I mean, Abraham has an encounter at Shechem, and Jacob definitely has an encounter at Shechem. So after Jacob leaves Laban and heads back to Canaan, they stop in Shechem, and they have a daughter who is sexually assaulted, and the sons of Jacob kill every male in the town. It's a bloody place, right, for a city of refuge. It's not a city of refuge yet when Jacob does that. Joshua has a moment or two at Shechem as he comes in. So there's some history with Shechem, and that's where Abimelech's hanging out. And so he approaches the people of Shechem. Here's something else that's an anomaly about the Abimelech story is Abimelech doesn't go to Gideon's family to get this support. He goes to his mother's family, part of the harem. He's somewhat illegitimate. She's identified as a servant. She's part of the harem, I think, of Gideon. And so instead of following a patriarchal heritage to find his supporters, Abimelech uses a matriarchal heritage. One other thing that's different about Abimelech is when Abimelech decides to become king, he's got to have a little money, right? You got to have some coin in your pocket. I guess daddy's tribute ran out, and he gets financed by the pagan temple. So what's that tell you about how this story's going to go, right? Shechem's got this history of violence. Abimelech's got the name. Daddy didn't leave a good legacy. He's not following cultural norms, and the pagans are going to finance him. It doesn't look good, right? It doesn't look good for Israel. And plus, there's nobody's bothering them, right? This is all internal. The way you want to destroy a country, destroy it internally first, and then it's easy to external invasion. So here's what Abimelech decides to do. One thing is, if you're going to eliminate autonomy, and there's 70 other suitors, what do you need to do? You got to get rid of the competition, right? That's my euphemistic way of saying what Abimelech did, right? He takes the score. There's 70 sons of Gideon. He wants to be the son of Gideon. So it would be nice. I guess he could, round them all up, give them passports to Australia and start, some kind of colony over there. But it didn't quite work that way in the ancient Near East. And so Abimelech then embraces the violent heritage of Shechem, not the good heritage of Shechem. So, to eliminate the competition, you know what you have to do to them? You got to kill them, right? This is mob wars. You got to get rid of any threats to your reign or your power base or your power. So he kills all of his brothers or half-brothers. Except for one. Listen, I'll give you a little advice. If you're going to wipe out the competition, wipe out all the competition, right? If you're going to play that game, it will come back to haunt you. So that's kind of the start of his reign, right? Let's get Mama's family involved. Let's persuade them that consensus rule is not going to be very good. Let's centralize the government, so to speak. Let me be your guy. So he volunteers. Well, so his dad gets asked to be the king, His dad refuses. Abimelech then asks the people, hey, let me go ahead and ask myself and say yes for you, which he does. So the only thing is Jotham gets away. One little brother. And Jotham then tells a fable. By the way, this is another element that's introduced in the Abimelech story, which is part of the Judges story. Two things are building in the Judges story kind of down the road. One is the monarchy, kingship is coming. Two is the school of the prophets. The classic prophets are coming. The Samuels and Elijahs and Elishas, they're coming. And so Jotham takes on the role of the classic prophet with this fable or parable, if you will. And that's found in chapter 9, beginning in verse 7. I do want to read it because it's quite poetic. Let me say this where he starts. Jotham hears about his brothers. He's escaped. He stands at Gerizim. So let me give you a little history of Gerizim. So when the second generation of Israel is about to go into the promised land, and the Deuteronomic covenant is given, and if you read in like 28 through 30, you get blessings and cursings. So part of the people stood at Gerizim, and they yelled out the blessings, and the other part of the people, what was the other mountain? I just went blank. They answered back the cursing when they're fulfilling the covenant. So Gerizim is the place of blessing. But the view is blessings and curses. This is Deuteronomy coming full circle, and so there's a parable said. Listen to me, the lords of Shechem. That's who Abimelech went to try to gain his power, or I guess he did gain his power. And he tells the parable. One thing about these parables, it's like Jesus' parables. Trying to figure out every single piece of that is a dizzying exercise, right? So I'll read it, and you tell me who's the bad guy here, okay? That's all I need to know. Who's the bad guy here? Or who are the bad guys? Put plural on that. The trees once went out to anoint a king over themselves. And so they said to the olive tree, reign over us. And the olive tree answered them, shall I stop producing my ritual by which gods and mortals are honored and go to sway over the trees? And then the tree said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree answered them, shall I stop producing my sweetness and my delicious fruit and go to sway over the trees? And the tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I stop producing my wine that cheers gods and mortals and go sway over the trees? So all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. So that's his parable. Then he explains it a little bit, kind of what's going to happen after that. So you get trees, and you get bramble, and you get some conversation, right? You got a parable. So I would say this. The trees are kind of multifaceted. They are the blessings and provisions that God gives to Israel in the land of Canaan. In some ways, you see that in what they are. But they're also leaders who are willing to give up those blessings to get what they want. Hey, we need a king. So remember one of the big themes of Judges 21-25. In those days there was no king, so every person did what was right in their own eyes. So they're looking, right? They're looking. Just somebody lead us. And so in the history of the Judges, you get no takers. Right? You have opportunities, you get no takers. But Gideon was pretty close. He wouldn't take the job. He wouldn't take the title, but he took the job. But anybody want to take a stab at who the bramble is? Yeah, Abimelech's the bramble. That's all you got to get out of the parable, right? You can try to figure out all the different nuances of which tree is what and what. Hey, it's the bramble. But there's a little bit of this Deuteronomic blessing cursing piece to this, right? If it's done in good faith, then I'll be blessed. If it's not, then curse, right? The fire, which will play into the story of Abimelech a little bit. Then Jotham does a bit of explanation to the leaders of Shechem. This is starting in 16. Therefore, if you've acted in good faith and honor when you made Abimelech king, and you have dealt well with Jerubbaal, that's Gideon, and his house, and have done to him according to what he's deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life. In other words, if this is honorable, you're going to keep my father's good name. Again, you can debate on what exactly that is, but he did rise up and defeat the enemy, the Midianites, right? For my father fought. But you, he said, have risen against my father's house. So he throws the gauntlet down. And have killed his sons, 70 on one stone, which is important. So kind of makes me think they're beheaded, possibly, which could be interesting too. And have made Abimelech, the son of a slave woman, king over the lords of Shechem, because he's your kinsman. These are his mother's people. So he begins to say, if you've acted in good faith and honor, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come from and devour the lords of Shechem and Bet Milo, and let fire come out of the lords of Shechem and from Bet Milo and devour Abimelech. And so then he goes and hides for fear of his brother. Right? Kind of that Jacob Esau thing. Right? You call your brother out, he might come whip you. So obviously he's proven that he would. So there is something that's set up in this. You got conflict coming, right? You got a guy who covertly took over the kingship and manipulated through power and murder and mayhem. And you got a brother who's calling him out and calling out the people that put him in. And so just in case there's not going to be conflict, God makes sure that there is conflict. So Abimelech rules over Israel for 3 years. But look in verse 23, that God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the lords of Shechem. I would suggest that's a spirit of conflict, unrest. Let's just shake this bramble out, right, a bit. So God's still around, which is very important. Even in this dark period, God's still around and God's still acting. For the lords of Shechem have dealt treacherously with Abimelech. So, guess what happens? If you, I'll just ask this. If you gain power by violence, what do you think your tenure in power is going to look like? Yeah, it's going to be violent, right? If you live in violence, and that's how you start, and that's your modus operandi, don't be surprised when it comes back at you, right? Most violent people find violent death. It's true of leaders and probably true of us too. So, it's getting nasty. And remember, these are God's people fighting God's people, not God's people fighting oppressors. The God's people have become the oppressors, which again speaks to kind of the nature of what's going on. And so, now listen, if you're going to go fight Abimelech, what do you got to have? You got to have somebody to lead you, right? You got to have a guy who's just as nasty. So, there's a guy named Gaal in town, and he says, hey, I'll take him out. Take him out. I suspect that if him taking them out, that is going to come with the price, right? This is not out of the goodness of his heart to take him out. So Gaal kind of calls him out and says, "Look, if I was in charge here, I could take him out." And so I'd say, come on out and fight. Violence begets violence, right? So Gaal makes a threat. He's going to gather some folks. He's willing to be the guy. Problem is Abimelech has an inside spy named Zebul, who hears this. He sends word to Abimelech, and he says, you better kill them before they kill you. Here's a plan. And he dies. Right. Sets a trap, waits home by night, rushes the city. And you know what happens when he rushes the city? After he takes it over, he burns it. What was the parable? Right? Fire's coming, boys and girls. Get ready. This is the guy you wanted. You wanted the bramble. Fire's coming. Somebody's going to get burned here. That's what Jotham's parable was about. Somebody gets burned. So, Abimelech goes and ambushes the city, takes on the people of Shechem, and kind of calls Gaal out. And Abimelech chases him and whips the folks, and so they can't deal with that anymore. So Abimelech's kind of feeling bloody. He's won. He's got some violence, so he goes to a place named Thebez and decides to do the same thing. Don't know why. It just seems like that violence is at his nature, and right, and so he heads out to do another city. And there's a tower in it, and he gets ready to burn it, right? He's going to do the same thing, more fight and more fire. So, it's setting up for another one of those things. Crazy man with a little power, right in his own cities for what? For what? Because he can. This reminds me a little bit, maybe a little bit of what happened this last year, but definitely back in the 90s in the post Rodney King trial, that there was riots that went on, and what happened is, unfortunately, a lot of the people had nothing to do with any of that ended up losing businesses and getting hurt and getting killed. And same thing's happening here, right? Thebes is kind of out of it. They don't seem to have a dog in the hunt. And you just got a guy who's crazy, right? Bloodthirsty. He got a taste at Shechem and heads to Thebes to do this again. And God's probably had enough of him. Right? So there is something to that, by the way. Psychotic lunatics that are going against the will of God and oppressing the will of God will eventually find their end, however God chooses for that to happen. God intervenes with Abimelech in a really interesting way again. So you remember he killed all the brothers on a stone, or with a stone, one or the other. I think it's on a stone, but. So, one of the ongoing things in Judges, and its counterintuitive message, is the prominence of female heroes, right? And the guys are pretty much not, right? They're anti-heroes. women seem to be a little more honorable in Judges. But they're also looked upon with more and more disdain, females are, as the book goes on, and until we got to where we started at the end, where they're just, it's treated awful. As Abimelech goes and seeks to take over Thebez, and he breaks through the wall and he goes to the tower. And so this is kind of, remember in Lord of the Rings, the keep, right? To go back in there, and he's getting ready to, just cause some more chaotic destruction. And this unnamed woman, in this case, drops a rock on his head, right? Stone for stone. It's coming back to haunt him. The parable's coming true. Fire didn't work, right? And as she does that, there's some dishonor with that. She's maybe even a Canaanite, not sure. Listen, I can't have a woman kill me. So he asked his arm bearer to kill him. I'm kind of thinking the arm bearer's okay with it. Yeah, thanks. Thought you'd never ask, right? Well, if you'd asked me this months ago, none of this would have happened, right? Be glad to oblige you. Abimelech dies he tries to die with honor, but here's what, verse 56, God repays Abimelech for the crime that he had committed against his father in killing the 70 brothers. He repays Shechem too. So the curse of Jotham comes true, right? And the kind of the tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic question, well, if you did it honorably, it's going to be okay. If not, it won't. So you have a failed monarchy that goes on, another failed attempt at monarchy in the book of Judges. So what's the takeaway, right? I think what's the takeaway from Abimelech about leaders who thirst for power? He's thirsty for it, right? Is there anything in this saga that says, hey, the people of God matter to me? It's just about leveraging position. It's about taking what you want, not what God gives you. And it does seem that God is mostly absent from this story, except in the form of punitive judgment. God doesn't raise up a leader because there's nobody who's oppressing, even from within, except for this unnamed woman. That's who God raises up. The other leader who wants to take Abimelech out is just as power hungry as Abimelech. Right? Gaal is. Hey, I'll do it. It's going to cost you, but I'll do it. There's a lot about, I think, just about leadership in this story that are takeaways, and a lot about just following people, right?
I'm just intrigued by, in the parable, the tree is looking for a leader.
Right.
So hard that you went to the bramble.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I have kind of jokingly said, but I don't think it's a big joke, is what most people want? A benevolent dictator. Somebody to tell you what to do, be kind about it. Somebody to take the responsibility for you, right? Not being responsible to you, but to be responsible for you. That's the easy way, right? Just tell me what to do. Take care of me and tell me what to do. And that may work in some systems. I'm not here. This is not talking about, political and economic systems. I'm thinking about life. I mean, really, what would you rather have? Give me 6 rules to follow, or love God and love neighbor? Give me the 6 rules, right? That's easier. I don't have to do any self-reflection. I don't have to I don't have to figure out, even when neighbor's an enemy, what that means to love neighbor. I don't have to wrestle with Numbers 5 through 10, and talk about restitution in sermons, right? Which, by the way, it was a really weird sermon Sunday. For a lot of you, apparently. And for me, too. Isn't that what you want, really? Just take care of me. Yeah, it's... there's no discernment here. Listen, this has happened. Abimelech's not the only time this has happened in history, right? That a charismatic, power-hungry leader rises to power and convinces the people that he's the right guy. Right? That's happened more than once. Would you not agree? In the history of humanity, it will probably happen again. It's probably happening somewhere in the world right now. And we know the most horrific case, at least in our modern history, is what happened in Nazi Germany, right? By the way, under kind of the guise of the Christian faith, where that starts. It sounded good. So what Abimelech offers, if I can say this, what Abimelech offers sounds good. You know why? Because it's efficient. What do you want? 70 leaders? You want 70 committees? Every time you want to build a road, it's got to go through 70 committees? Or do you just want me? Because I can make it happen, right? I got the goods, I got the support, I got the money, right? I got the financing. Forget consensus leadership. Let's make it, right, authoritarian leadership. And sometimes we default to that, don't we? It's easier, sometimes that's easier on people too. If we, and so what I think where I want to get to that is this. Now you push back, it's okay. Is I think sometime in our mentality, as we look for technique and systems and those kind of things, we think if we can just get the right person at this place, in this position, right, whether that be president, governor, preacher, chief of staff at whatever it is, right, just name it. If we can just get the right person there, get the right CEO in the right company, then it's all going to be good, right? Is it? It doesn't seem to work out that way very well. Right? You know why? There's not many benevolent dictators. Is there? I didn't watch it. I can't comment on it. So, and it doesn't matter. The cultural system or the corporate system or the family structure, if you have that mentality, if we can just get the right formula, right, just get the right mix of people then it's all going to be good. It'll be okay. Somebody's going to take care of us. And I'm not discounting, and I think leadership's important. And on a personal level, I'm much more fond of efficient, centralized, as long as I'm the centralized, right? Usually. I think that's one of the things that I keep asking about judges, the two questions, right? Does autonomy work, and does God approve of the monarchy? Because autonomy is tough, isn't it? It's tough. So's monarchy. You know why? Because people are tough. And a people, especially as we read in the book of Judges, a people who are not prone to God, it's a tough road. There is no magic formula for leadership in that, right? This is not. And if you start in chaos, you know where you're going to end? You're going to end in chaos. If you start by leveraging power, you're going to get power leveraged against you. And if you're thirsty for power, somebody out there is thirstier than you are. It's a sad account, right? And the people went along with it, which just makes it even sadder. Except for that one brother who escaped, right? Jotham said, listen, this is what you want. He called it, right? This is what you're going to get.
So did he just live all of his days in the hill in hiding? You don't see anymore.
Well, probably, I'm guessing after his brother gets rocked, he might have come out of hiding. But I don't know, because the moral compass of Israel by this time is gone. It's not there. Right. The ethic of the people of God has deteriorated to the point where nothing is sacred and holy and righteous anymore with them, except whatever they want it to be. It's a very humanistic culture. And the Jephthah and Samson cycles just support that follows it up. So he is in his own way, right? He's prophet and judge because he definitely. But what the writer of Judges reminds us though is that vengeance belongs to God, right? So you get this infighting where vengeance is back and forth, and I'm on your side, now I'm against you, and violence and competition and all those things are there. He reminds us through Jotham and just through the narrative that, look, it's God who has to settle the score. Which is hard, by the way, for in some of these cases. There is some moral dilemma for me. If God is the one who settles the score, then where do I fit into that? Right. Is violence and war justifiable for the right cause? And do I fit into that story? Where does that unnamed woman fit into to the story? God empowers her. Does God empower her to pick up the rock? Or does she go, yeah, it's a bad guy. Let's just see where this rock falls. So, those are some of the questions to me that come out of this. You may have some too, or just comments about the story of Abimelech, but it's a rough tale, right? It is a rough tale, and but it's one that's relevant. It happens. It happens in a microcosmic way, in a macrocosmic way as well. It does happen. He's probably got some charisma. He's a good salesperson. Especially if he's going to sell efficiency, For those of us who are slaves to efficiency, like efficiency. It's easier if you just got one person making a decision, right? Not saying it's better. I'm saying it's easier. So. All right, what you got? Throw it at me. I'm in a snarky mood anyway, so. So.
Touched on numerous times the cycling judges and everything, but the spiraling
Right.
It's still cycling, but now the spiral is so far downward that the Israelites are causing trouble for themselves.
Right.
And this goes to show how much more when you're not following God and you're stepping out to try to take it around, how utterly senseless it is. It will not succeed. And you may have some limited success, but you're going to get it. it shows that as Abimelech did, he started off completely against God, and how did he deserve it?
Yeah. He doesn't even pretend, right? I mean, he's to that point. I mean, there's just nothing redeeming about the story except God's God's involvement in it, and even that is rough, right? I mean, it's God has to intervene in this punitive way to get rid of Abimelech, and it's. And by the way, this is what humanism does, and when humanism begins to take over. You become your own God, right? You make up your own rules. The only rules are the ones that you want that would benefit you, and you make up your own ethic. You decide what's good and bad, right? And what's typically good is what's good for you, however you define good, right? But when humanism takes over, this is what you get. Yeah, I wish there were some warm fuzzies in this story. Just a little bit of humor. It's dark, albeit. I think the stone on the head's kind of funny, right? In its own way. It's almost cartoonish, right? But sadly cartoonish, I guess. All right. Anything else from Abimelech? I talked a lot tonight, but I was being efficient. It's supposed to be a little joke. So,
Be careful who we follow.
yeah, I think there has to be some discernment, right? Even for charismatic people who make sense, a little bit of sense. I mean, what he says makes some sense, right? Hey, there's 70 of us. We're never going to get anything done. Or there's me. We can get a lot done. So, yeah. And again, highly charismatic, very articulate, and so, but not much discernment. Right? Lots of promises, whether they're explicit or implicit. Right? Lots of promises, and
The boundaries of Israel this time the same as out of the 12 tribes.
yeah. So it's still basically the conquest, right? Where Joshua comes in and sets all the tribal. Yeah. So the Danites, remember, moved north, and because they can't quite deal with the coastal people, and so it's just easier to leave. But mostly the lines are the same as when Joshua comes in. I mean, at least the descriptions of the lines are the same. The practical where they're living, maybe a little movement, but yeah. So it's the conquest lines now. So, yeah. But the Canaanites are still hanging around, and the Philistines are hanging around, and the people of the Transjordan, the Moabites, and the Ammonites, and all those other ites, they're all hanging around. So, yeah, it's a messy place. It's a messy world. Looking forward to some hope, okay? And so you get Abimelech followed up with 2 minor judges, and I'll cover this some next week. But there's some tension in that, but there's a little thread of hope in those 2 minor judges, and that'll be my teaser for next week. So, okay. Well, I've talked for 50 minutes. That's probably enough for me, anyway. Unless you got something else you want to dance on, I'll tango with you. So.
How effective is the
Well, obviously in this case, not very, right?
Initially, it was very effective.
Right. Well, yeah, your competition goes away in a hurry, right? Yeah, I think you would see that in any system which is based upon efficiency, right, over efficacy. That's what's the best good, the greater good, because efficiency looks good to start with. I mean, one of the strengths of the Roman Empire was they are highly efficient at everything. Infrastructure, war, execution, they're good at all of it, right? Highly efficient. But they have a very, very structured hierarchical system, right? Caesar is God and you are not. And get in line. Choose wisely which side you're going to be on. But they're efficient. There's no doubt about it. Until they morally, internally decay, which is what happens to the Roman Empire. Right? Internal decay opened the door for external invasion. So, which is, again, that's not the first time that's ever happened in history with them. So, can't happen. Listen, this is a sobering story, right? Again, there's no warm fuzzies in this one anywhere. It does make you think. So, all right, don't forget, next week, this class will meet on Wednesday, not Thursday. If you show up Thursday, do whatever you want to do. I won't be here. That goes for you people watching online, too. Next Wednesday, not Thursday. All right, so read 10, 11, and 12 for next week. The Jephthah saga. I can already tell you you're not going to like what I think happened to Jephthah's daughter. Well, what I'm convinced happened to Jephthah's daughter. So, anyway, peace.